July the 22nd, 2020. Guys, you're looking at our website at bpearthwatch.com. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. Of course, the tropics. We have Tropical Storm Gonzalo now in the Atlantic, and it looks like the system in the Gulf of Mexico is starting to gain strength. We're going to look at both of those very closely. Also, we've had a 7.8 quake up in the islands at the very top of the Ring of Fire off the Alaskan island chain there. And the buoys around the entire northern and northeastern side of that quake picked up the movement. There's no tsunami warnings out, but again, it was felt. And when you're dealing with the quakes in that area, all of that's tied into Alaska and coming into the northeastern United States, into that area, that one long mountain chain there that comes through. And I've seen it when we had the big lake up in the Yellowstone area, guys, and it formed Quake Lake. They had landslides. It was a hydrothermal explosion with very high winds. It knocked trees down, blew cabins down. A lot of people got hurt. But it was a geothermal explosion, but those quakes had started up at the top of the Ring of Fire. What I want to point out, first, we mentioned this the other night, that we now have the ACO Power solar system kits, guys. There's three things in survival that that besides your faith, and that's going to be the key when all of this is over. But you need water, you need food, and backup power can be very helpful. Even though you may have a grid down situation, if something happens, or if it gets shut down, or an EMP or whatever. But if you've got backup solar power, guys, you can run a good bit of your appliances, depending on how much energy you have. But you can definitely have the power for your lights, small freezer, small air conditioner if you do it right. But you'll have the supply to communicate. We've talked about this before, like if you had CB radios or transceivers that are ham and shortwave CB radios, you can get what's called a converter, not an inverter, but a converter that will take electricity at the in the AC range and change it to DC. And what you do is on your radios and stuff, you put a cigarette lighter, just solder it on there and heat shrink it. And you can plug it right into the converters. They're not expensive at all. But if you got solar power, you can tap into that voltage and communicate. So you got water, food, and some power, backup power. And you can do a lot. With a system, you'd be getting into a 3,000 watt minimum inverter with a peak of around 6,000 or 9,000. And you can run a 5,000 BTU air conditioner because it's got that extra amperage, to kick in the compressor on a unit that size. So these things can really be lifesavers. But here in the center, this is our mainstay supporter, and this is my Patriot supply. We got the Alexa Pure water filters and the food, guys, here, and there's accessories also. And if you haven't noticed, they have 0 interest for up to 12 months, over 90% approval rate. It's safe and secure. Come here and click on this, and you can go through products from survival food with 20 and 30 years shelf life to the Alexa Pure water filter. If you're not familiar with it, you can scroll to the bottom, and I've got an entire video series on it here, and check that out. But what I want to do now is come down to the very bottom almost of the links on the left side. Let's go to the National Data Buoy Center. I'm doing this, guys, so you can check this stuff out. And a quake happened in this area, and we'll look at the USGS. But this is telling you that the buoys from off the Japan coast all the way down off the coast of California felt this movement. 7.8 again. There are no tsunami warnings. The buoys themselves are not showing high waves, but it was a movement that was felt over a very long section of the Ring of Fire. Check this out. So you guys in Japan, you guys up in the northwest, Alaska, Canada, down into the Seattle area, all the way to California, this is something that you pay attention to. Just keep your eyes open. keep an eye on the USGS site, which is also on our website. But this, again, was felt across a very large area. Just think about this. Now, coming back up, at the very top of our links is the earthquake link. It'll take you to the USGS. Click there. Now, this is what we have. This is the 7.8 here. You see the aftershocks. And guys, 5 hours after this quake, it's just coming in, that you've had a 5.4 right here off Vancouver. See that? This is all tied into this Cascadia subduction area that feeds into the top of the San Andreas Fault here. But you've got in this area 34 of 68 quakes on the planet, 7.8, 6.1. These are 28 kilometers deep. These are 105 kilometers southeast of Perryville, Alaska. You can see they're concentrated offshore. But this is at the very top of the largest fault zone on the planet, the Ring of Fire as we know it. You've had basically everything offshore. But that's what we're dealing with now. And like I said, pressure will be pushed around this area. So keep your eyes on that. And coming back to our links, guys, we've tried to have most of these on here for a very long time so you can quickly look for yourself and find out if you've got problems. Come down to hurricanes. It'll take you to the National Hurricane Center right here. What you see is Gonzalo. Maximum sustained winds at 45 knots or 50 miles an hour. The pressure is 1,000 millibars. It is moving west at 14 miles an hour. It's got a good clip coming in there. It's sped up somewhat. And here, we've still got a 40% chance of cyclone formation in 48 hours. We're going to look close at the satellite images of both. That's saying that tropical wave is producing a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, central and southern Florida, and western Cuba. Gradual development of the system is possible while it moves west, northwestward, and a tropical depression could form during the next few days. This disturbance is expected to move over the central Gulf today and reach the northwestern Gulf on Thursday and Friday. The Air Force has scheduled the Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft, if necessary, to fly later today. Now, Gonzalo is sitting here. It's about to become a hurricane. Notice this, by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. And this was not on here last night. It was going to remain a tropical storm. Then they're saying once it reaches just before it enters into the Caribbean, slowing back down to a tropical storm. And there's not a lot of wind shear, but that dust storm that we've been seeing is trying to catch up with this one now. And it's starting to move faster because of a low pressure system that we saw last night that was pushing up on that Saharan dust layer. It's pushing it further out into the Atlantic at the same time. And so what we're looking at by 8 a.m. Monday, still a good ways away, you got a tropical storm setting south of the Dominican Republic. Now remember, they've got it centered here. It's an average of the models, but the models carry it from here at the top of this white area to here. So we're not sure, but they're averaging it going right through the center. And when that happens and it stays away from the islands, there's not a lot to weaken it as far as the landfall. And as of 10:30 a.m. this morning, guys, you can notice that the spaghetti models are tightening, but no longer are they moving northward as they come across the Leeward Islands here. And the furthest north is just catching the tip right there in the Puerto Rico area. See that? Anyway, so they're coming together. Cat 1 hurricane possibly by tomorrow. And we'll just have to see how that dust, if it catches it, it's closing down on it now, and that will inhibit at least the northern section of the storm. But let's go to those satellite images. Now, this just came in at 10:30 a.m. also, and before we go to those satellite images, they're starting to put models on the system in the Gulf, and this one would become Tropical Storm Hannah if it gets that strong. But the models are showing it coming in from South Texas up to close to the Houston area. Remember, if it does this, the strongest part of the storm will be on the right quadrant. That's how they move. But in the video last night, and we'll see it again today, there was a lot of movement in this area, once it gets here, to move it north. So they love to make that right turn, and we'll look at the wind patterns. Now this is the wide Atlantic view, and you can see as the sun rose earlier. Here's our storm in the Gulf. We will zoom down on that and take a closer look at it, and you can see that surface level is rotating. Here is Gonzalo, and again, Cat 1 by in the morning. What we're seeing is, here's your large dust cloud coming off the Saharan Desert, and this area is the reflection of the sun as it moves across the ocean there. So we'll let that get past, and we can get a better look at it here. Now, there's still a very thin gap in this area where the dust is not completely collapsed on Gonzalo yet. Here, and what has happened, this area has moved off the African coast. We saw it last night, and it's pushing this further out to sea and pushing it closer to the top section of Gonzalo now. Still getting action coming off the African coast. It's typical for this time of the year, but let this play through, and you'll see as the sun gets further this way, you can see how intense or how large, this dust cloud is. Check it out. And the sun separates there, and you can see the difference above the storm as far as the dust, and how clear and blue it is below it as that sun gets out of the way. See that right there? So it's kind of a race now. And they were talking about as it gets close to the Leeward Islands here, that it will go to a tropical storm back from that Cat 1 hurricane, and it could be because of the dust catching up with it and overtaking it. We'll keep an eye on it, but let's take a close look now into the Gulf itself. Now, as the sun is getting on top of the storm, it's getting very close. In a couple hours, it will be right on top of it. That's going to intensify these thunderstorms. And if you look, and you can see it's pretty clear that the center circulation is pulling everything into it, especially if you look right into this section here. So at the surface, you have a very strong circulation starting. It was already started yesterday afternoon. Now it looks like it is strengthening. Now, they're not predicting it to become a hurricane, but tropical storm is definitely in the making. Again, that would be Hannah, if I'm not mistaken, but it could bring much needed moisture to the southwest U.S. also. Just depends on where and when it turns. Notice this area is moving north, so as it gets closer to it, that may have some effect on exactly where it comes ashore. Houston, I would definitely keep an eye on the storm, and of course South Louisiana. But guys, we're watching this. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.